fake it till you make it. Never, never, never fake it. Stay authentic, stay genuine. And it almost does not matter what was your family background or educational background. Consciously go and surround yourself with people who are different from you. If I knew everything, or if I felt that I had it all under control, I wouldn't evolve, I'll stagnate. I'm ever curious. I am Aditya Ghosh, just someone grew up in India, built a business, and has been a ever curious, student of life.
Hey Aditya, good afternoon and welcome to Qunba. It's an absolute privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Aditya, you switched from a unique place of being a general counsel for IndiGo into a leadership position as the CEO and president at a very young age. How did you know this was the right time to make this pivot from a specialized role into a general leadership role?
Look, I was always interested in how businesses worked. And I also knew there is no guarantees of success. There are no guarantees in life. Why I felt this was the right thing to do was, I felt like, wow, when would be the next time, or how many people in my circumstances will get this amazing opportunity, right? This amazing opportunity to try to create something that the world has never seen before and get to learn, and I think that's what propelled me into that decision. And I remember, on the eve of my taking on the role of the president, I wrote a SMS. There was no WhatsApp in those days. I wrote an SMS to Rahul Bhatia, one of my shareholders, and said, Rahul, I'll give it my best shot. And he wrote back within seconds, I think, saying, Aditya, that's all I'm looking for. And I think that kind of then just cemented the belief that, yes, I'm going to give it my best shot.
And then just to double click on that, how did you specifically go about gaining confidence and the respect of all stakeholders when you were new to being a business leader?
I'm ever curious. Okay. So that constant curiosity also, it prompts me into looking at a new business, whether it be as an advisor or just somebody, who's trying to find out more about a business, or for that matter, lead it as a CEO or on the board or whatever it is. But that curiosity also is very much a part of how I interact with my senior colleagues, because each one of them brings to the table something that I have absolutely no idea about. That then leads to a sort of, hopefully, a relationship of respect, where I'm learning from them. And more often than not, they, I hope, feel that I've got their back. It's not that I'm not going to question it. It's not that I'm not going to push myself and everybody else, towards excellence and towards trying to be the very best that we can be. But at the same time, I'll always take the first bullet. So I think that's kind of how. But at the same time, I'm deeply grateful to every one of those people and tens of thousands of other colleagues who've made me look good over the years. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that.
What was the most important leadership trait you saw in Vinay, the former Jet Airways CEO, that gave you the confidence to start an airline with him?
Oh, Vinay is an incredible leader. One thing which I think everybody will tell you, Vinay is so authentic. There is no second side to Vinay. The way you see him in the press, the way you see him at home is exactly the same. And he is the most honest and authentic person I think I've ever come across. And he's just the nicest guy. Incredibly, warm and empathetic and humble. He's just, I'm really fortunate.
What are leadership lessons, one from each, that you picked up from Rakesh Gangwal, Rahul Bhatia, and Ritesh Agarwal?
From Rakesh Gangwal, I just learned relentless, being relentless in pursuit of excellence. From Rahul Bhatia, I always say that if delegation is an art form, Rahul is the Michelangelo. His ability to empower people and really believe in them. And with Ritesh, his ability to constantly absorb and evolve every 6 months or a year without losing touch with who he is as a person, but just evolve his personality and who he is as a leader. I think that's what I would say.
You've been on both sides of the table. One is a CEO who's worked with founders and promoters, and now is a promoter who has a CEO running his business. What do you think in this equation when you get a CEO from outside? What is your advice to CEOs in promoter-led organizations? And what is your advice to promoters as to how they should lead or founders when they get a CEO from outside?
I'm not a great fan of the word promoter, right? Of course, I'm a big fan of entrepreneurs and founders. I think let's start off with first, in this entrepreneurial journey, when founders and entrepreneurs take on professional managers, CEOs, I think the biggest lesson there is, and I think great entrepreneurs do that well, they're acutely self-aware of what are their strengths, and they actually have a longer list of things where they know that's not what they're good at. So the talent that you bring in, the professional manager or the CEO, do they have skill sets that actually complement, those that you have? So there are, and they bring in those things. So you start off with that sense of respect that this other person has brought in a certain skill set, an experience, a way of working or an approach that you don't have yourself. On the other hand, my advice to professional CEOs and managers, and I have been that for a while, is start off from the same point where you have a tremendous amount of respect for that entrepreneur and that founder, to say, you know what, that's the person or that's the group of people who were able to identify an opportunity where no one else could see it. And they have an amazing gut to be able to understand what are the levers of the business and what really makes the business tick. So this sort of relationship of mutual trust and respect, where you're learning from each other and evolving along the way, is, I think, what makes a great relationship.
We'll come to a little bit of career advice from Aditya Ghosh. What's that one piece of career advice that you've heard people give but completely disagree with?
I keep hearing people say, fake it till you make it. And I think that's the most bizarre advice. Actually, it's just the opposite. Stay authentic, stay authentic, stay genuine, acknowledge the things that you don't know, and put it out there saying that, I'm here to learn, I'm curious about this, and I'm going to evolve. So that's like, never fake it, is what I would say.
How does one get better at decision making as a leader? And how have you scaled yourself as a leader?
I found that whenever you are faced in a certain situation, breaking down the problem into parts so that you know what are the various elements that you're trying to address, then kind of taking advice, then kind of, anchoring yourself in real evidence, and real data to see, am I really addressing the right problem, or am I only addressing a symptom? So getting to that root cause, and I think it's called truth seeking these days, getting down to where is that actual problem or the challenge or the opportunity, and then kind of taking a decision based on this is a big part of it. But at the end of the day, leaders also have to have conviction. But that conviction, I think, comes from this process.
Data or instinct? What does Aditya Ghosh rely on more as a leader?
I grew up in a time where data was not something that was, always evident and easy to find. So I'd say, as far as I'm concerned, I think I started off with instinct, but now my conviction and my instinct is always underlaid with real data and hard evidence.
3 words that describe, according to you, Aditya the leader.
I think empathetic, courageous, responsible.
Aditya, what's the most brutal feedback you received on your leadership? Who did it come from, and what did they tell you?
I think it came from, it wasn't brutal, it was very, very insightful, and it came from a gentleman called Harish Gandhi. He used to be the group head of HR at Interglobe Enterprises, and IndiGo was one of the companies. And he was my colleague on the leadership team and on the board. But I remember him saying, Aditya, there is too much of a gap between you and the next person in the line, So how do you kind of make sure that as you continue to evolve, people are around you or the next line of leadership also evolves, not in terms of responsibilities, but just evolve as leaders.
If you were to hire somebody asking them only one question, and based on that one question, you decide whether to hire him or her, what would that be?
I always ask this question at the end of every interview I've ever taken. I think I've taken about 150,000 interviews in the last 16 years. The last question I always ask is, what is your personal dream, deeply personal dream, and why? I think that gives me an insight of what does it really, what makes that person tick? What are they doing to chase it? What does it mean for them?
Aditya, what is the best mentoring advice that you have given someone? And what's the best advice you have received from a mentor?
More often than not, I tell people to be themselves, and believe in themselves. Because, like me, most human beings, as they're going through their careers, go through self-doubt. And without being arrogant, without being complacent, being sort of, authentic and being yourself and not being afraid to be yourself is something that I have always said. I think there are lots of great, pieces of advice that I have got, but I think probably the one that comes straight to my mind is I got this advice from Professor Ramcharan, the famous, writer, and over dinner one day he looked at me and said, Aditya, do what you love and excel. And I think that was just a phenomenal piece of advice.
What creates self-doubt for you, Aditya, and what do you do to overcome it?
Part of leadership and part of being able to constantly evolve is also being at the edge of your seat and being outside your comfort zone all the time. So if you're going to be outside your comfort zone, there'll be always 100 things that you will think that I'm not sure I know everything about it, right? But I see that as curiosity, right? And I see that as a powerful way for me to kind of constantly evolve and grow and roll ahead, If I knew everything, or if I felt that, I had it all under control, I wouldn't evolve, I'll stagnate.
What's the one thing you discovered pretty late about leading people that you wish you had known of earlier?
That even after you put your heart and soul into it, not or most people who you lead will not look at you with any sense of great gratitude. And that basically means that leadership is a very lonely role. And you've got to go back to what the Gita said, do your deed and don't expect anything out of it.
How do you specifically deal with criticism as a leader?
It's hard, firstly. But I think after that initial emotional response to any criticism, I try to again break it down to say, you know what, let me not focus on why somebody is saying this to me. Let me focus on what they're saying and then try to analyze that, is there truth in what they're saying? If there isn't, I'll ignore it. If there is some truth in it, then take that and try to work on it and then say, you know what, okay, I got it. I'm going to try to get better at this. And that's both personal and professional criticism.
3 things that you do whilst giving feedback to CXOs.
I went to a course called the Leadership at Peak at a place called the Center for Creative Leadership in 2008. There, I was taught a feedback module called SBI, Situation, Behavior, Impact. So whether you're giving positive feedback or criticism, you anchor it in a certain situation so that it's not vague. You identify a behavior that person expressed, and you also relay the impact that it had on you. So for example, John, you were in the class the other day, and while I was speaking, you were totally distracted and you were on the phone. The impact that it had on me was that I felt like you didn't take me seriously. Or John, you were in the class the other day and I was teaching, and despite the fact that you had fever, you came to class, and not only that, you keenly participated. That really made me feel good and important. So thank you for that.
As a leader, how do you balance being compassionate with your team, yet pushing them really hard for results?
Oh, I don't see any paradox in it. Empathy is being able to walk in the shoes of the other person. And therefore, when you have to drive performance, when you have to achieve a certain outcome, it also means stepping into that other person's shoes and taking the time to make them understand why you are driving this. Not the what. The what everybody does, right? You got to pour water into this glass. Why is what people never explain. But if you explain to that person saying, by you pouring water into the glass in a timely manner, I can hand it out to the next marathon runner who's passing by. Thank you for doing that. That person suddenly feels like they're participating in the larger mission. Likewise, if you stepped into that other person's shoes, it's also easier for you to take the time to explain that, buddy, these are the things that did not quite work. I did not like the way you treated other people. You were disrespectful to others. You were not a team player. You were not an inspirational leader. You really became complacent. You became arrogant. There was a misconduct. There was negligence. And, you may be a hero, just not on my ship, on somebody else's.
How did you go about retaining talent in a team when, let's say, they get a better or a counter offer?
If your colleague or your leader is someone who is truly living the values that you uphold. Number two is being able to inspire and deliver on the outcomes and inspire others. And number three, very importantly, if for that person staying on in your company over a long period of time is good for their career and is good for their personal well-being, then absolutely you should go out of the way. Likewise, there have been many times, or at least a few times, that I did not retain somebody or I could not retain somebody because I genuinely felt that they would get much further in their career or in their life if they took on another role. And I'd wish them well, and they're great brand ambassadors. And I think that's probably the reason why I'm in touch with so many thousands of ex-colleagues of mine, and out of which a few hundred of them would be people who would have taken a better opportunity somewhere else. Because that's part of leadership, right? That's part of leadership. That's why I said responsible. You are responsible for that person's career as much as you are responsible for the outcome of the company.
Aditya, what's been the proudest moment in your career when you felt that in a crisis, your leadership really made a significant delta?
I think it's always been around people. Every once in a while, when the organization went through a crisis, where a certain section of colleagues or employees felt ignored, felt that they were not being treated with respect, or felt that this is not the place to be at. And then I got personally involved, and we were able to turn the tide, and where all of them felt, no, this is it, and this is where I will spend the rest of my life. I think that has always brought in the most amount of satisfaction. And by the way, the byproduct always has been profits, hyper growth, high productivity, and all those things that are supposed to be the hard metrics that CEOs chase.
What's the biggest risk Aditya Ghosh has ever taken in his career that has paid off? And the one risk you think that hasn't?
I think the biggest risk would have been repeatedly move out of a comfort zone, move out of something that I've been doing for a while or I've been studying for a while, and then I'm doing something completely different out of curiosity. The one thing that hasn't worked, I can't think of that. I mean, the outcome may have been different, but each time it was a learning journey. So I don't mind that.
Aditya, what are 3 mistakes from your own career that you're telling your kids to avoid at all costs?
It's various points of time where I would have, maybe not just from my career, but even from my school or college days, right? One would be if I had got complacent or lazy. The second would be where, I might have let ego come in the way, and I might have done something not because it actually furthered the cause or the company, but it was just a shot in my arm and there was an ego boost that I wanted. And the third would be if ever, even for a moment, I was not authentic, and I came unprepared, or I kind of faked it, those are the kind of things that I would say I'll ask my children not to do.
Quick 30 questions. Here we go. Just one word answer.